The central diplomatic chamber of the United Earth government gleamed with a pristine mixture of brushed titanium and transparent carbon glass. Soft ambient lighting traced the room's geometric lines, creating an atmosphere of calculated calm that belied the impending moment of truth. Ambassador Elena Rodriguez sat perfectly still, her tailored navy suit a stark contrast to the room's minimalist design. Ahead of her, the massive holographic display flickered to life, revealing the imposing form of the Zarkon Imperial delegation. They materialized like living metallic sculptures, their exoskeletons a complex network of interlocking plates that shifted and realigned with each microscopic movement. 3 primary delegates stood at the forefront: Ambassador Kralik, the senior diplomatic representative; General Vornax, the military strategist; and Adjudicator Zinra, the legal arbiter of imperial protocols. Elena's fingers traced the rim of her coffee mug, a delicate porcelain piece she'd brought from her family's collection in Buenos Aires. The cup itself was an act of subtle defiance, a reminder of human history and personal connection in a moment of potential galactic conflict. The translation device hummed to life, its quantum processors parsing complex linguistic structures in milliseconds. Ambassador Kralik's voice emerged, a combination of mechanical precision and organic undertones that spoke of centuries of technological refinement. Representative of Earth, the alien began. The Zarkon Galactic Imperium has completed its comprehensive analysis of your species. Your technological capabilities, while marginally impressive, are insufficient to warrant independent status in the greater galactic community. Elena took a slow, deliberate sip of her coffee. The liquid was still hot, its rich aroma a stark contrast to the sterile environment. General Vornax stepped forward, his massive frame casting a shadow across the holographic projections. Your planet has 2 options: complete submission to imperial governance or total systemic elimination. We will not negotiate further. The statement hung in the air, a weight of absolute certainty that had crushed countless civilizations before humanity. Most species would have responded with panic, with desperate pleas, with calls for mercy or attempts at last-minute compromise. Elena Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" she asked, her voice calm and almost conversational. The translation device captured not just her words, but the subtle nuances of her tone, a mixture of mild amusement and profound disinterest. Adjudicator Zinra's metallic appendages clicked together, a gesture that, in Zarkon culture, signified absolute judicial authority. Your lack of appropriate response indicates potential cognitive dissonance. The Imperium will provide a standard processing period of 3 standard galactic cycles for your species to comprehend the magnitude of our declaration. Another sip of coffee. Elena set the cup down with a soft clink that seemed to echo impossibly loud in the charged atmosphere. "Gentlemen," she said, leaning back slightly in her chair, "I'm going to need more coffee for this conversation." The Zarkon delegates exchanged a series of rapid, intricate gestures, a communication protocol so complex it would take years for human xenolinguists to partially decode. Something in Ambassador Elena Rodriguez's response had completely disrupted their anticipated interaction matrix. Little did they know, this was precisely her intention. The underground strategy room of the United Earth Diplomatic Corps buzzed with nervous energy. Holographic displays flickered with intercepted Zarkon communications, their alien algorithms dancing across translucent screens. Surrounding Ambassador Elena Rodriguez were her most trusted advisors, a diverse team of specialists who looked equal parts terrified and exhilarated. Dr. Marcus Chen, the team's cynoanalytical expert, adjusted his quantum interface glasses and zoomed in on a particularly complex communication pattern. "They're not just threatening us," he muttered. "They're performing a ritualistic dominance display." Elena leaned forward, her fingers tracing the holographic data streams. Years of diplomatic training had taught her that every communication was a puzzle, every thread a window into a civilization's deepest fears and motivations. The Zarkon Empire operates on a hierarchical system so rigid it's practically crystalline, she explained to her team. Her voice was calm, almost academic. Their entire social structure is built on a model of absolute control. But control is always most fragile when it appears most absolute. Junior analyst HFY Sci-Fi pulled up a comprehensive breakdown of Zarkon Imperial communications. Layers of encrypted data revealed intricate power dynamics that most human analysts would have missed. Look at the communication protocols, she pointed out. There are at least 3 distinct factions within their diplomatic course, each with competing internal agendas. Alina's smile was predatory. Exactly. The team watched as she began to construct a multi-dimensional strategy map. It wasn't just about defending Earth. It was about understanding the complex socio-political ecosystem of an alien civilization that had never encountered a species quite like humanity. Their threat is a performance. Alina continued, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface. They conquered dozens of civilizations by presenting an image of absolute, unquestionable power. But power is never as monolithic as it appears. Dr. Chen pulled up historical data from previous Zarkon conquests. Civilization after civilization had fallen, each surrender following a nearly identical pattern. Overwhelming display of force, followed by systematic integration, followed by complete cultural absorption. They've never encountered a species that refuses to follow their expected script, Alina observed. A classified file appeared, her personal dossier on Zarkon cultural communication. Years of research, countless intercepted communications, deep psychological profiles of their leadership structures. Where most saw an impenetrable alien civilization, Alina saw a complex social organism with inherent vulnerabilities. This isn't about military strength, she told her team. This is about narrative. They're used to being the authors of every interaction. We're going to rewrite their story. The youngest member of her team, Lieutenant Michael Rodriguez, no relation, but sharing her last name seemed to give him additional courage, looked simultaneously confused and inspired. How exactly do we do that? Alina's laugh was soft, but carried the weight of absolute confidence. By being completely, utterly unpredictable. Holographic displays began to shift. Communication patterns, cultural analysis, historical data, all began to rearrange themselves into a strategy that looked less like a defensive posture and more like an intricate dance. The Zarkon Empire, Alina said, her voice steady, is about to learn that humanity doesn't play by anyone's rules but our own. Outside the strategy room, the first light of dawn began to break. A new day, and the first moves of a diplomatic game that would reshape galactic history. The next diplomatic session arrived with an electric anticipation that crackled through the chamber like barely contained lightning. Alina Rodriguez arrived precisely 3 minutes early, a deliberate calculation that would unsettle the meticulously punctual Zarkon delegation. Her briefcase contained an unexpected arsenal, a collection of human cultural artifacts carefully selected to challenge every preconception the alien diplomats possessed. A worn paperback copy of 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, a vintage vinyl record of Miles Davis's Kind of Blue, a hand-knitted blanket from her grandmother, a collection of children's drawings from a multicultural elementary school in New Zealand. Ambassador Krolek's translation device hummed to life as Alina casually placed these items on the diplomatic table. The alien's metallic appendages twitched with barely contained confusion. We will now continue our discussion of Earth's potential integration into the galactic community, Krolek began, his vocal modulations precise and controlled. Alina opened the book, her fingers tracing the well-worn pages. "Let me tell you a story," she interrupted, her voice soft but commanding. The Zarkon delegates exchanged rapid, almost imperceptible gestures. This was not part of their carefully scripted diplomatic protocol. She began to read an excerpt from the novel, a passage about memory, about the interconnectedness of human experience, about the way stories create and destroy worlds. The translation device struggled, its quantum processors working overtime to capture the nuanced metaphors, the lyrical language that defied direct translation. General Vornax shifted uncomfortably. The concept of narrative as a form of cultural transmission was entirely foreign to their rigid, hierarchical communication systems. Then Alina placed the vinyl record on a portable player she had brought. Miles Davis's trumpet began to weave a complex, improvisational melody that seemed to defy the very concept of rigid structure. Jazz, a musical form that was pure human innovation, a conversation between musicians that followed rules only to beautifully break them. This, she explained, is how we communicate, not through absolute commands, but through conversation, through interpretation, through the space between the notes. The Zarkon delegate's translation devices began to smoke slightly, overwhelmed by the complexity of her explanation. She unfolded the children's drawings next, colorful representations of hope, of imagination, worlds where boundaries didn't exist, where creativity knew no limits. Each drawing was a tiny rebellion against structured thinking. Your empire sees communication as a series of hierarchical transmissions, Alina continued. We see it as a living, breathing entity. Fluid, adaptive, alive. Adjudicator Zinra's metallic form seemed to vibrate with barely contained frustration. Their entire diplomatic model was predicated on absolute control, on the suppression of individual variation. And here was a human, a single representative, systematically dismantling everything they understood about power and communication. The knitted blanket came last. Alina draped it casually over the back of her chair. This was made by my grandmother, she explained. She learned the pattern from her mother, who learned it from her mother. Each stitch is a connection, a story, a piece of our collective memory. Something fundamental was happening in the diplomatic chamber. The Zarkon delegation was experiencing a form of cultural dissonance they had never encountered. Alina Rodriguez was not just presenting a defense. She was offering an entirely different way of understanding existence. And they were completely unprepared. The holographic display erupted with a dazzling array of economic models that seemed to dance and shift like living entities. Alina Rodriguez stood at the center of the presentation chamber, her fingers conducting an intricate symphony of data that would reshape the Zarkon Empire's understanding of value, progress, and innovation. Dr. Marcus Chen stood beside her, his quantum interface glasses reflecting complex algorithmic patterns. What we're about to demonstrate, he explained to the bewildered Zarkon delegation, is how human economic systems create value through collaboration, not conquest. The first projection showed a startup ecosystem. Unlike the Zarkon model of centralized resource allocation, human economic systems appeared chaotic, almost organic. Small nodes of innovation interconnected in seemingly random patterns, each representing a potential breakthrough that could transform entire industries. Your empire sees resources as finite, Alina began, her voice calm and methodical. We see them as infinite opportunities. A series of case studies materialized. A community-driven solar energy project from Kenya, a marine restoration initiative from the Philippines, a medical technology breakthrough developed by a global consortium of researchers who had never met in person. Each example challenged the Zarkon understanding of economic progression. Adjudicator Zinra's translation device struggled to capture the nuanced concepts. Economic value in the Zarkon system was a strict, hierarchical equation. What Alina was presenting was closer to a living, breathing organism, adaptable, resilient, constantly reinventing itself. The next projection demonstrated collaborative innovation platforms. Imagine a global network where a teenager in Brazil could collaborate with a researcher in India, a designer in Sweden, and an engineer in South Africa, all working together to solve complex challenges. No centralized authority, no rigid hierarchical structure, just pure human creativity unleashed. We don't compete, Alina explained. We collaborate. General Vornax's metallic form seemed to vibrate with barely contained frustration. Their entire imperial economic model was based on resource extraction and absolute control. Humanity was presenting an entirely different paradigm, one where value was created through connection, not domination. The most stunning revelation came with a demonstration of adaptive economic models. Traditional economic systems saw resources as static. Human systems treated resources as dynamic, renewable, constantly transforming. A piece of technological waste wasn't an endpoint, it was a potential beginning. A startling example emerged, a global network that transformed plastic waste into building materials, energy sources, and innovative product designs. What the Zarkon Empire would discard, humans saw as an opportunity for reinvention. Your empire conquers, Alina said softly. We create. Dr. Chen pulled up a final projection, a complex, living network that showed how a single innovation could ripple across global economic systems. It was less a linear progression and more a living, breathing ecosystem of human potential. The Zarkon delegation's communication devices began to overheat. Their entire understanding of economic systems was being systematically dismantled. Ambassador Krolek's translation interface crackled. This is not possible, the alien representative stammered. Alina's smile was both kind and utterly ruthless. Welcome, she said, to humanity's understanding of possibility. The chamber fell silent. Something fundamental had changed. The Zarkon Empire was beginning to realize that they were not facing a potential conquest. They were witnessing an entirely new way of understanding existence. Deep within the crystalline spires of the Zarkon Imperial Communication Hub, something unprecedented was happening. Internal communication channels began to fragment, their once impenetrable network developing microscopic fissures of doubt. The emergency session convened in the most secure chamber of the Imperial complex. Holographic displays flickered with intercepted human communications, each transmission a puzzle that defied their standard analytical models. Military commanders, diplomatic strategists, and imperial adjudicators sat in a configuration that would have been unthinkable mere solar cycles ago, in open disagreement. General Vornak slammed a metallic appendage against the central communication console. We must initiate immediate containment protocols, he demanded, his vocalization modulator vibrating with barely controlled aggression. The human ambassador represents an unprecedented threat to imperial stability. But the room was no longer united behind such a simplistic approach. Ambassador Krolek's holographic projection showed signs of what, in human terms, might be called exhaustion. Our traditional conquest models are inadequate, the senior diplomat observed. The humans have introduced variables we cannot easily calculate. The youngest strategic analyst, a rare position of potential innovation within the rigid Zarkon system, spoke up. Her communication implant flickered with a series of complex data streams. Their adaptive capacity exceeds our predictive algorithms, she reported. Each interaction introduces exponential complexity. Classified files began to circulate through encrypted channels. Detailed analyses of human cultural, economic, and diplomatic interactions that challenged everything the Zarkon Empire understood about potential conquest. Where previous civilizations had responded with fear or submission, humanity responded with creativity, humor, and an almost infuriating ability to transform potential conflict into opportunity. Deep in the communication archives, obscure historical records began to resurface. Whispers of other civilizations that had similarly resisted standard imperial integration protocols, but none had done so with the systematic, almost playful approach humanity was demonstrating. We are experiencing a fundamental communication breakdown. Adjudicator Zinra noted, their legal matrix struggling to process the unprecedented situation. The human ambassador had transformed diplomatic protocol from a rigid set of rules into a living, breathing negotiation. Internal communication logs showed something truly remarkable. Junior diplomatic officers were beginning to question the established imperial narrative. Subtle communication patterns suggested a growing fascination with human approaches to problem solving, to cultural exchange, to the very concept of potential. The emergency session reached a critical moment of tension. Traditional imperial protocol demanded absolute unity, but the human ambassador had introduced something far more dangerous than military threat. She had introduced doubt. Our entire expansion model is predicated on predictability, one senior strategist observed, her communication implant broadcasting a level of uncertainty that would have been considered treasonous mere cycles ago. The humans operate on a principle of constant reinvention. General Vornax's aggressive posturing began to lose support. The military solution suddenly appeared less like a strategic choice and more like a desperate attempt to maintain an increasingly obsolete worldview. The youngest strategic analyst's final report crystallized the emerging understanding. Humanity is not a civilization to be conquered. They are a phenomenon to be understood. As the emergency session concluded, the Zarkon Imperial Communication Hub experienced something unprecedented. For the first time in millennia, the Empire was faced with a potential interaction that could not be resolved through standard conquest protocols. The fracture had begun. The diplomatic backchannels of the galactic community hummed with an unprecedented energy. Ambassador Elena Rodriguez had become more than a representative of Earth. She was now a catalyst for a fundamental reimagining of interstellar relations. In a hidden communication hub located on the neutral trading station Nexus Prime, representatives from a dozen previously subjugated civilizations gathered in secret. Each bore the subtle scars of Zarkon imperial expansion. Cultures compressed, histories erased, potential systematically crushed. "Have you seen the humans' recent communication transcripts?" asked Kazara, a delegate from the Luminarian archipelago. Her crystalline communication implant projected holographic fragments of Elena's diplomatic interactions. "They're doing something we've never seen before." The Korean representative, a being composed of interconnected neural networks, analyzed the data streams. Adaptive diplomacy, they observed. Not conquest, not submission, but genuine communication. Each civilization represented in the room had a different story of imperial suppression. The Luminarians, whose light-based civilization had been reduced to a handful of refugee colonies. The Korean collective, whose distributed consciousness had been forcibly centralized. The ocean-dwelling Mirak, whose global communication networks had been systematically dismantled. But Elena Rodriguez had introduced something revolutionary, a model of interaction based on mutual potential rather than hierarchical control. Encrypted communication channels began to map out a complex network of potential resistance, but this was not a military alliance. It was something far more dangerous to the Zarkon Empire, a collaborative intellectual insurgency. The human ambassador's approach defied every standard model of diplomatic engagement. Where previous resistance movements had sought to fight the Empire, Elena was systematically demonstrating the Empire's fundamental irrelevance. "She's not attacking their system," the Luminarian delegate explained. "She's making their entire model of governance obsolete." A series of carefully constructed communication protocols began to emerge. Small cultural exchanges, collaborative research initiatives, economic models that didn't require centralized control. Each interaction was a subtle challenge to the Zarkon Empire's fundamental understanding of power. The Korean representative constructed a complex probability matrix. "Potential outcomes are no longer linear," they observed. "The human has introduced a quantum element to diplomatic relations." Hidden communication nodes began to activate across multiple star systems. Not a call to arms, but a call to imagination. What if resistance wasn't about fighting, but about creating something entirely new? Elena Rodriguez had become more than a diplomat. She was an architect of possibility. The neutral trading station buzzed with a quiet excitement. These were not military strategists planning an overthrow. These were cultural innovators reimagining the very concept of interstellar relations. "The Empire relies on our fear," the Mirak delegate observed. "She's offering something entirely different, our potential." Each civilization began to share carefully curated cultural artifacts, not as weapons, but as invitations, music that defied standard harmonic structures, mathematical models that challenged linear thinking, artistic expressions that refused to be categorized. The alliance forming was unlike anything in galactic history. It wasn't about resistance. It was about reimagination. and the Zarkon Empire had no defense against imagination. The final diplomatic summit arrived with a tension that could slice through titanium. The grand chamber of the Galactic Conclave transformed into an arena of intellectual warfare, with Ambassador Elena Rodriguez at its epicenter. Holographic displays flickered with generations of imperial conquest, a visual history of the Zarkon Empire's unbroken dominance. But something had changed. The displays no longer looked like a testament to power. They appeared more like an obsolete museum exhibit. Ambassador Krolek's communication implant struggled to maintain coherence. The carefully constructed imperial narrative was unraveling in real time, each thread pulled by Elena's systematic deconstruction of their fundamental beliefs. "You've misunderstood the nature of power," Elena began, her voice calm and precise. "Power is not about control. It's about potential." The chamber fell silent. Representatives from dozens of civilizations watched, their collective breath suspended. Elena began to reveal a meticulously prepared dossier that would become known as the Collaborative Potential Manifesto. Each page dismantled another layer of the Zarkon Empire's ideological infrastructure. Economic models that demonstrated how collaborative innovation generated exponentially more value than hierarchical control. Cultural exchange programs that showed the transformative power of mutual understanding. The most devastating revelation came through a series of comparative analyses. Every civilization the Zarkon Empire had conquered had actually been systematically limited, their potential artificially constrained. Elena demonstrated how these same cultures, when given genuine collaborative opportunities, could generate innovations that would have been unimaginable under imperial control. "Your empire doesn't expand," she explained. "It contracts. You reduce potential. We expand potential." General Vornax attempted to interrupt, but his communication channels were systematically overwhelmed. The diplomatic firewalls he relied on were being dismantled not through force, but through understanding. The Korean representative, a being of pure distributed consciousness, began to translate Elena's presentation into a complex mathematical model. What emerged was not just a diplomatic argument, but a fundamental reimagining of interstellar relations. Each slide, each data point, each carefully constructed argument did more than challenge the Zarkon Empire. It made their entire model of governance look tragically limited. The imperial delegation's communication networks began to fragment. Junior diplomatic officers were sending encrypted messages questioning everything they had been taught. The rigid hierarchical structure that had defined their civilization for millennia was developing microscopic fissures of doubt. Elena wasn't just presenting an alternative. She was demonstrating that the alternative was not just possible, but manifestly superior. The most profound moment came when she introduced a series of collaborative research initiatives. Projects that would have been impossible under imperial control were now not just possible, but inevitable. Medical breakthroughs that could transform entire civilizations. Environmental restoration technologies that could heal worlds. Educational exchange programs that could unlock generations of suppressed potential. "We're not asking to replace your system," Elena said softly. "We're inviting you to expand it." As the presentation concluded, something remarkable happened. The imperial delegation was no longer united in opposition. They were divided by possibility. The Zarkon Empire had encountered many civilizations, but they had never encountered humanity. And humanity was fundamentally different. The aftermath of the diplomatic summit defied every known protocol in galactic history. What began as a potential extinction-level confrontation had transformed into something entirely unprecedented. A collaborative reimagining of interstellar relations. Ambassador Elena Rodriguez sat in a small, unassuming conference room, surrounded by representatives from civilizations that had, mere solar cycles ago, been sworn enemies. The Zarkon imperial delegation was no longer a monolithic entity, but a collection of individuals grappling with a fundamental shift in understanding. "This isn't about winning," Elena explained, her fingers tracing a holographic map of potential collaborative initiatives. "This is about expanding what's possible." The first breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A junior Zarkon diplomatic analyst, whose name would later be recorded in Galactic diplomatic archives, proposed a comprehensive cultural exchange program. It was a radical suggestion that would have been unthinkable weeks earlier, a direct challenge to millennia of imperial doctrine. Holographic displays began to map out initiatives that seemed to defy traditional understanding. Medical research collaborations that could transform healthcare across multiple star systems. Environmental restoration projects that could heal worlds previously considered beyond recovery. Educational exchanges that would unlock generations of suppressed potential. Ambassador Kralik, once the most rigid representative of imperial expansion, now found himself, itself, at the center of a transformative moment. The translation device captured a nuanced emotional state that had no direct equivalent in human language, a mixture of profound loss, unexpected hope, and radical reimagination. "We have been wrong," Kralik stated, the words carrying the weight of millennia of imperial history. Completely and fundamentally wrong. The Korean representative began to construct a complex mathematical model of the emerging diplomatic breakthrough. What emerged was not just a treaty, but a living, adaptive framework for interstellar cooperation that could evolve and transform in real time. Elena's approach had done something remarkable. She had not conquered the Zarkon Empire. She had made conquest itself obsolete. Representatives from previously subjugated civilizations began to share their most profound cultural artifacts, not as weapons or displays of power, but as invitations to genuine understanding. Music that defied standard harmonic structures. Mathematical models that challenged linear thinking. Artistic expressions that refused to be categorized. The document that emerged was unlike any diplomatic agreement in galactic history. It was less a treaty and more a living blueprint for collaborative potential. Each clause was designed not to restrict, but to expand. Not to control, but to enable. Potential is not a limited resource, Elena explained, her voice carrying to every corner of the communication network. It is infinite when we choose to share it. The Luminarian delegate, a being of pure energy, constructed a communication matrix that captured the profound emotional landscape of the moment. What emerged was less a diplomatic document and more a symphony of possibility. General Vornax, once the most aggressive proponent of imperial expansion, now found himself advocating for collaborative research initiatives. The transformation was so complete, so fundamental, that it defied previous understanding of diplomatic possibility. As the final agreements were encoded, something remarkable happened. The communication networks that had once been tools of imperial control now became conduits of unprecedented collaboration. The Zarkon Empire had not been defeated, it had been transformed. And humanity had introduced a new concept to the galactic community, the radical possibility of mutual potential.